I'm Cody Daigle-Oriens, and welcome to StoryFest 2020. Due to the ongoing impacts of the coronavirus pandemic, StoryFest 2020 is going virtual. From September 15th through September 29th, StoryFest will premiere 13 live and pre-recorded author events, featuring top authors and creators in genre fiction, comics, young adult fiction, and middle grade fiction. This year, we have over 50 authors joining us from all across the country, and in cross-genre panels, they will explore the big ideas at the heart of telling stories in today's world. Even though we can't welcome you to the library's forum in person, we're glad to have you with us virtually. Thanks for being here, and enjoy StoryFest 2020.
Cena Grace is a writer and illustrator known for his groundbreaking work on the GLAAD Award-nominated Iceman series at Marvel Comics, and has worked for Image, DC, Dark Horse, Boom Studios, and more. His current series are Ghosted in LA, Read Only Memories, and the upcoming Slice of Life series Getting It Together, coming this October from Image Comics. Rob Guillory is an Eisner Award-winning American comic book artist. Born and raised and currently based in Lafayette, Louisiana, Guillory is most known for his 8-year run on Image Comics' Chew. The book went on to achieve much success, winning 2 Harvey Awards, including Best New Talent for Guillory, 2 Eisner Awards, and has been translated into a dozen or so languages. Guillory is currently writer-artist on his hit creator-owned series Farmhand from Image Comics, and he's currently developing Farmhand for TV at AMC Studios. Sara Richard is an Eisner and Ringo Award-nominated fine artist and illustrator, as well as a writer of short stories. She is best known for illustrating comic book covers for companies such as IDW Publishing, Oni Press, Marvel, Dynamite Comics, Action Lab, with other illustration work for DC Collectibles, Storm King, The Witch House in Salem, Massachusetts, and Gallery 1988 in Los Angeles. Her art can also be seen at the historic Oakland Cemetery's Visitor Center in Atlanta and has been printed in British Vogue, Vanity Fair, and the World of Interiors magazine.
So, like a lot of things that we really love, I honestly think that like comics find you as a reader and as a person, and more specifically, the right comic finds you when you need it most. So, can we start with the 2-part question? I'll ask the 2 questions separately and go around once and then around again. So first, what was your first comic? Where'd you buy it? All that kind of stuff. So if we could start with Sara.
Yeah. So I used to read a ton of manga in high school. But I would say my first like comic that kind of got me into doing comics was is Deadpool versus the Marvel Universe. And I got it at Newbury Comics in Manchester, New Hampshire. And that just blew my mind with the illustrations in there. Plus it had like Deadpool, dinosaurs, Spider-Man, and symbiote. So it was just like all the things that I liked. And then got on a huge Deadpool kick from there. That was like years ago. Now there's so much Deadpool, I don't even know what to do with it. So, but yeah, that was my first one anyway.
Cool. How about you, Sina?
It started off with a lot of movie tie-ins. Like I remember getting like Ninja Turtle comics that were tied into the movies and then getting the actual Ninja Turtle comics. And then one of my very first comics was a Detective Comics annual, I think from 1991-ish. And it has a really sick Sam Keith cover, and I still have it to this day. And what's great is my entry point into comic books was the grocery store, back in the day when grocery stores would have comics. R.I.P.
And how about you, Rob?
Oh man, all of my early stuff was really, really weird. And I'm not exactly sure how I came into contact with this stuff, but my very first comic that I can recall owning was actually a Kool-Aid Man comic. This entire comic was about, it was just an entire comic of Kool-Aid related comics. And the main story was about this little like fire character, like a Human Torch kind of character, who's just going around making people thirsty. And then Kool-Aid Man would just show up and like quench everyone's thirst, which Kool-Aid does not actually do. So I don't know where that came from, but that was my first comic, and I absolutely fell in love with the medium from there. And yeah, that was it for me.
All right. So the second part of the question was, when was the first time that you saw yourself in a comic book? And I'll start with Cena.
I didn't, so I put myself in comic books, and then Rob put me in comic books too. We were just talking about that before this. I show up. I'm not me, but I'm drawn into Chew. No, I didn't really see much of myself in comics, and I think even when I was reading Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, it's like that story is not my story. That story is not even my mom's story. You know, my mom didn't have to flee the revolution. So yeah, I just had gumption and decided to do a lot of auto-bio comics or inject a lot of, for lack of a better term, like my vibe into anything I do that's creator-owned. Or even, you know, when I'm doing Big Two stuff, I'm always sneaking in just things that reflect kind of my world. So yeah.
How about you, Rob?
I don't really know, honestly. I mean, I think that I connected with just so many different things about comics beyond, like, you know, I don't know if I was looking for me, at least my demographic in the comic. I was more kind of fascinated with how it made me feel. So there were all kinds of things. I mean, I think the first one that really grabbed me was Jonan Vasquez's, pretty much everything that he did. God, what did he do? I Feel Sick was one of them that really kind of grabbed me for whatever reason. A bunch of anime, pretty much anything by Rumiko Takahashi. I just really loved that kind of sense of humor just grabbed me. I mean, I think those are the first books I really like connected with to the point of just cracking up in the backseat of my mom's car. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't think I ever looked for me. I think I was always looking for something other than me to kind of go to, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Mm.
And Sarah?
Yeah, I was trying to think. I'm trying to think of what I was drawn to. I guess so. It's not a comic. It's a book called the Book of Flying by Keith Miller. It's my favorite book. It's very poetic without being poetry. But it's basically about like this guy who's looking for the Book of Flying so that he can get wings and fly. And like I mean, I tried like hang gliding years ago. Like I've always dreamed I could like fly, I guess. So that character and everything he goes through is like, I could totally see myself fighting a minotaur to do that, you know, like that would be really cool. But let's see. Trying to think of like all the characters I used to cosplay when I was a kid, like in high school too, because those were all the ones I'd pick who I'd relate to. So yeah, this is a really crappy answer. Sorry.
So
Caught me off guard.
Not crappy.
No.
That was a really good answer.
It actually, all three answers tie into something. So, Sina, I heard an interview that you did a little while ago, I think right at the beginning of the quarantine, where you said you were getting a little burned out on memoir comics, doing that, like doing memoir. And what you said was so interesting. You said instead you were interested in looking at things through the mirror of yourself, which I think you touched on there. But could you talk about that a little bit more?
No, yeah, absolutely. What I said was what I said, and I don't even remember it. Yeah, I did. Well, so at the end of my 20s, I did a book called Nothing Lasts Forever that was about getting sick and having like massive creator block and reconciling a lot of issues that I think most folks deal with in their 20s. And so at the end of it, I was just sort of burnt out in terms of like living your days thinking that you've got a story to tell about it for someone else to digest, and also just like filing away every memory as something you can then mine for a story. And it just felt weird, and I just ran out of things to say. I just felt very like, okay, cool, like this is enough for other people to know, and I just kind of want to do other things and learn new lessons, and also have those lessons be not put on like a grading scale of like importance or whether it matters to anybody else. So what's nice now is, I'm still we're all storytellers here, so we're all processing everything and thinking about whether like that's a good story or whether there's a there creatively. And now I'm less interested in the me of it, but everything still comes through my brain. So I'm focusing on what I think is important about things. So, you know, that's what's fun, is everything I'm working on now is still stuff I'm fascinated by and about, but not, it does, I don't, it's not, it's no longer about what I think about the thing, you know, it's just about the thing. And that's what's really great about people who do start to develop their own skills as storytellers, is that's what makes anything unique. Like, you know, we're all telling essentially the same story, but it's our lens that makes it different. And that's what's, you know, been the best advice I've ever gotten, is like, you know, just people being excited about like what I have to say about this or that character.
So just kind of on that thread, a more general question for all of you guys, why comics? So what was it that made you fall in love with comics? And then why choose to tell those stories in the graphic medium? Let's start with Sarah this time.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I've always drawn, and like I've always written little stories. Like it started off when I was in high school. It always keeps coming back to all the anime I used to watch. I honestly watch none of it anymore, but I would write fan fiction like nonstop on fanfiction.net, which the story is still up there. I've checked and I've only told one. Here it is. It was for a charity, and the charity was to find what my screen name was on that, and it is so bad. Anyway, but like just being able to come up with characters and make them do more than just, you know, stand blankly on a page, like have them interact with other characters that you create, and just creating your own world is just like just visually as well, because obviously my word's not so good every once in a while. So being able to draw something out, like I always felt that, you know, drawing was my first language, and then speaking is something I'm still working on. But yeah, and then just to see what other people do and how they interpret a situation through their own style is really fascinating, and super inspiring. Every time I leave a convention in the long ago, in the before times, like it was really cool to see where the bar was set and see like where everyone's kind of, you know, mood and how they were illustrating that into their own stories was. And then just I came back home with more inspiration to keep creating. So now I'm starting to work on more stuff that I kind of feel is more closer to where my heart's at. Like I did a lot of cool projects in the last few years, but like now I'm feeling like I'm kind of feeling that groove where I want to be. So it's really exciting.
So before I jump to Rob, so what was kind of the switch for you then to want to tell those types of stories? Was there something specific, or just kind of the progression of your career?
Kind of figuring things out, I guess, like trying to do some of the like licensed corporate stuff, and then like with anything I get really sick of that, and then I get really rebellious and like about it. So I'm going to do my own thing over here and just see how it goes. But yeah, like kind of what Sina was saying before too, it's like working on what other people want, you know, and like what other stories other people want, like finally doing something that I want to do, and like do something that I would like to read, or like I would like to, you know, see, and just making it. So
For sure.
Yeah.
And Rob, so to you, why comics? Why tell stories in comics?
I don't know. I fell in love with them at such a young age. I mean, I had two uncles that were really into comics, and they were kind of like the prototypical geeks, like comic geeks, who had a giant collection, a giant suitcase full of comics in the closet. So I'd come over at a very young age before I could even read, and just kind of rifle through all these old comics. And I mean, even further back than that, the guy who got them into it was my grandfather's brother, who was in Vietnam, who was also a giant comic fan. So it was just kind of in my bloodline. And I drew from a super young age. And, you know, I remember winning like, you know, art contests in like the first grade, and being surprised people liked it. I was like, really? Like, I'm winning this? What's going on here? And just kept coming back. Eventually just kind of started collecting on my own. And it just stayed with me for whatever reason. I mean, it was just the purest. I guess I've always kind of been a storyteller in some fashion. I remember being young and kind of play acting, you know, with my friends and like telling stories and having everyone laugh and that sort of thing. And that is just, I think, part of me and part of my family. My family's all like, they're all jokesters, they're all storytellers, they all know how to really lay things out. And I think the visual part of it just came with it for me. And it's just part of who I am. I don't know why it's there, but you know, it's to me, I think comics are the purest form of storytelling there is. I mean, I thought about going into film for quite a while in college, and I played around with it, but I just always kept coming back to the page over and over again.
And Sarah and Cena both hit on it. And I wanted to ask you, Rob, about, because Farmhand really is a personal story. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I mean, before Farmhand, I kind of got thrown into comics really, really hard. You know, Chew was my very first book, the first like big book I ever did, and it kind of went from 1 to 100 like super quickly. And a lot of life happened in that 8 years that I was working on that book. You know, when I first started on it, my wife and I had only been together. We'd been married for about a year. We had no kids. And by the time I finished Chew, you know, we had been married a decade and we had 3 kids. So a lot had happened during that span of time, and I didn't really have a place to deal with it. Plus, you know, we all have family stuff, we all have baggage, and a lot of processing of my life happened during that time. You know, the second you have kids, it kind of makes you, it reframes your own childhood in a way, and you start looking back at your own childhood and thinking, you know, that's really interesting that my parents would make the choices that they made. So I think after finishing Chew, Farmhand just makes sense for me because it was the thing that was on my heart. It was really the place that I wanted to kind of turn my creative eye, and I needed to process these things before I could start working on anyone else's projects. You know, and you know, whether or not I work on anyone else's projects, I have no idea, because I'm just enjoying not having to answer to anyone else and just being kind of the boss of this thing. As hard as it can be, kind of shouldering that burden, it's been a good burden doing it.
And I want to talk to all 3 of you about the business of comics in a little bit, but just to take a quick step back, I think you all have pretty interesting ins into the comic industry. So we'll start with Cena. Can you talk about how you got into comics professionally?
Yeah, and this is also to sort of tether myself to the previous question. It comes from, like, why comics comes from, like, you know, we're always learning things, and we're always you know, and when we're in school, we're taking classes for things. And I think what really cemented the why comics for me was, like, the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn, and the more I did, the more I wanted to do. Whereas, like, you know, I've taken up baking, and if I hit a wall, I'm like, I just don't want to learn piping. Like, I'm just going to work around it and just keep making bread, like, whatever. And same with music, where it's like, I just don't want to learn music theory. I just want to learn some chords and learn to play Blackbird on my guitar. But with comics, every step of the way, I was just fascinated by, like, how does someone do this? How do you get this done? How do you learn to draw hands? How does a comic book get made? How do pages get colored? And I started by interning at Top Cow Productions in high school as an editorial intern. So back then they had a bullpen, and I got to see how artists did pages, and I got to see how colorists turned books around, you know, like, overnight. I got to see inking assistants and background assistants, and I got to see production designers all do their work, and how editors had to manage all of that. And it didn't steer me away. It didn't have me go running, seeing how hard everyone worked for, you know, what is sometimes very little pay. You know, like, it's fair most of the time, but sometimes it's really not if you think about the hours you put in. And I just loved it, and I wanted to learn more and more. So I started making my own zines, and I worked at a comic store, and it just, you know, kept building and building and building. And I always kept coming back to comics. You know, I would think, like, oh, I'll do illustration, and nope, I just wanted to tell sequential stories. And yeah, that led to me even becoming a comic book editor for a time. And finally, just sort of, I realized it's like, okay, while I can do all these other things, I'm in the boat and position where Rob is, where it's like, I'd rather be in complete creative control and have a lot of autonomy, because I'd rather just like write and draw my own stuff or delegate with a ton of authority. And that's a good place to be. And you know, I'm really happy because I'm still in love, and I'm still excited to learn new things, and I'm still excited to not be afraid of how technology can help us. I think some of our peers get really stressed by the young kids who are, you know, Tumblr famous and working entirely digitally. And instead I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch some YouTube videos. I'm going to catch up to these kids.
I like the idea of delegating with total authority in general. How about you, Sarah? How'd you break in?
So after I found that Deadpool comic, I just got super into comics and getting as much as I could. And so I found Double Midnight Comics in Manchester, New Hampshire. And yeah, they're the best. That's where I've had a lot of people when I first started out in my rep as well. And so I walked in and I'm like, oh, hey guys, do you know anything about this Deadpool guy? And then they just showed me everything to get. And then they're like, hey, by the way, we're doing a free comic book day thing. You said you were an artist. You should come do some tabling and everything. So yeah, I started out at a free comic book day just drawing my stuff, because I was doing this weird kind of super, super swirly, messy kind of renditions of like Nightcrawler and Gambit and all my favorite X-Men, and mostly X-Men. but yeah, from there, you know, Boston Comic-Con, when it was still in the basement, went to that, you know, met Bob Shaw, who's my rep, and then he started putting me into more conventions, and I started meeting a couple editors. And actually I did it was a Kickstarter reward that I did, was to donate some money to have a womanthology funded, and then if you donate enough, then an editor would look at your work. So I was like, cool, I'll buy my way in then, I guess. So yeah, I ended up kind of talking to Bobby Curnow at IDW, and then also I sent him some stuff when I met him at a convention too. And that's just like, those two things were kind of that awesome recognition, like, oh hey, you were that girl that did that thing. And that was like right before My Little Pony started. So like, they're like, why don't you just do one of these covers? And I worked my butt off and did a whole bunch of covers as fast as I could. And it just kind of snowballed in a really good way from there. And then did that for 7 years. So, but yeah, like I'd always wanted to be a cover artist. Like I do love interior sequential storytelling, but I'm also like a squirrel and I get really distracted really easy. So like I'm kind of leaning more towards, I like illustration, because I like to throw everything into like one really complicated or like really cool compositional piece. So that's why I kind of was more towards covers, and doing variant covers was basically what I wanted to do. So that's been super, super awesome. But now, you know, I kind of want to use that knowledge of how to do a cool composition for one page, but to make a comic out of it, you know, and use like kind of art skills, but put it into a standard comic look and make it more of an art piece, I guess, even though comics are art, obviously, but more weird. I like the weird stuff, you know. So,
I mean, it's a unique that's a unique style for a graphic novel, right?
Thanks. It doesn't fit everything, is what I've been told a lot. So, but for what I've been able to do with it, I'm super proud of and super happy, and like, it's been a cool ride. So.
I know it's a basic question to ask that to comic creators, but I love asking it because the answers are always like so you had an art rep before you had comics work, which is so crazy.
Yeah.
Like that way. How about you, Rob? How did you break in?
Well, I mean, like I said before, I was making comics kind of throughout high school, and I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana, the area, and I didn't, you know, internet was just kind of coming in, and I didn't really know like how to break into comics. There was no, I mean, we had no Comic-Cons, there was no really in for me at that time. So around in college, my first couple of years, I started kind of really getting into comics again, and kind of really investing in my art. And I started working for my university's newspaper, and I was kind of their senior cartoonist for like 5 years. And at some point in my first couple of years there, I started really deciding, like, this is what I want to do. There's nothing else. It's not going to be film. It's not going to be architecture because I hate math. So it's got to be, this is the only thing I want to do. So I started doing the research, and I started going to shows mostly in like Texas, in California, just, driving places and kind of making a plan. I do like 2 shows a year, every 6 months, make a new portfolio, table, network, show myself around, critique, swap out business cards, posting on forums, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And, I started slowly but surely getting a little bit of work here and there, barely paying anything. I still had like a day job at that time, a night job. So I'd spend all day working in the office, and then 6 o'clock, I'd go to work at this dispatcher gig for like 8 hours, and then do it all over again the next day. And but eventually, I got offered Shoe, and just my wife and I just decided, it's time to just take the leap. This is what I want to do. Let's just see what happens. And it's been 10 years or 12 years since, and I've been full-time comics ever since.
So this might be an unfair question, but is there a non-comics job that you held that may have played some kind of role in you becoming the comic creator that you are today? And I'll start with Rob. We'll go the reverse order.
Yeah, actually, I worked at Office Depot for like 2.5 years in their copy and print center. So I was making books all day long. And I just fell in love with the process of actually like, formatting the stuff, printing it out, stapling the books, folding. Because I would make, the stuff I was making from the 4th grade was all, saddle stitched, construction paper folded in half, staples on the end. And I just, to this day, I still love the mini comic format. So I was doing that all day long at Office Depot for a good couple of years. So yeah, I actually printed a good amount of my own stuff at Office Depot while I was there.
How about you, Sina?
I had a chapter in retail, which I chronicled in a book, and I think that's it. Having such an awful time and quitting 2 really well-paying jobs, both like around only working there 6 months. It, like, for a minute I was like, wow, do I have commitment issues? Can I not like follow through on anything? Like, am I a quitter? And then, it sort of helped me see, like, no, dude, like, you have wanted to make comics your whole life. Like, you've been going at it since you were in 9th grade. And at that point, it's like you're going on year 9 of trying to be in comics. And, these day jobs are literally just day jobs. They're not career paths for you. And then also working at a department store, the experience was just so uniquely like weird, gaslighty, and dreadful that it helped me, come up with a story that was my first sort of solo gig right out of leaving Skybound, Robert Kirkman's company. So it was like I had this graphic novel that was a really great sort of way to introduce myself to people as like, I'm a writer and an artist, because until then I was just mainly known for drawing the little depressed boy at Image Comics, and people didn't know I could write. It's like, that's what I studied in college. So yeah, it was, I'm grateful for that awful experience, because it just made me realize how much I wanted to be doing comics instead of that.
How about you, Sarah? A non-comics job that played a role in what you do now?
Even my non-comics job was still kind of super related to comics. It's the only other job I really ever had was like Petco. So, but right out of college, I got a temporary position at Hasbro. I did a workshop for my last year. Or I participated in a workshop in my last year at college, CCAD, or Columbus College of Art and Design. And my teacher was my future boss's teacher from the past. So they came, did a workshop. Basically, we had to do like a action figure, and they would judge it and offer positions at Hasbro. So I like worked my butt off. I made this thing with like 24 points of articulation. It was like this weird harpy lady, and like all her toes articulated, and I was just like, oh, I want this job so bad. So I got it, which was rad. So started at Hasbro, and because it's Hasbro, they have like all Marvel license at the time anyway. This is all years ago, but I think they still have it. Star Wars, all that stuff. So the people I worked with were super comic nerds too. So we would basically work all day working on little bits and pieces of like comic book characters and then immediately go to the toy store and comic shop. And so we were just like inundated in it. And it was just fun. So like I would always see like a comic store as a place that, you know, is after work relief where you can just hang out and talk crap about the day with your friends that you all, you know, suffered through. The sculptors were kind of like the weird kids that nobody wanted to play with at Hasbro, so we got looked over all the time for all the cool stuff to do. And this was like back in the day of like hand sculpting everything. Now everything's like computer done, but this was like you'd be working on teeny little faces and hands and out of wax. So that was crazy. But then I realized I sure did like drawing these characters a lot more than sculpting them because I felt like I could, one, do it faster, and two, like my style, I felt like I had more of a voice in drawing than I did sculpting. You know, yeah, I mean, it was cool too because like learning how to sculpt some of these characters, it really helped with like foreshortening and learning how to draw like an arm looking at you like this all day because you're drawing like someone's hand really helps when you're trying to draw that character 2D. So yeah, like kind of took some stuff from there. And also I realized I like freelancing better than a corporate kind of like 9-to-5 thing. So definitely learned that from Hasbro as well.
I'd like to get into what you guys think how the industry has changed since you started. So Sina, since from when you got into comics, has the industry changed? You know, better or worse? If there's one or two things that really have left an impression on you and how it's different now than it was then?
Oh, it's changed a lot in terms of, you know, how people are getting their books and then how books are being made. You know, I'm like very reticent to say like if it's for the better or worse because it's just so fraught and complicated right now. Never mind that like we're all in quarantine, so who knows what the landscape's going to look like even when this comes out. Like everything's changing every day. But I will say something I really like that I think is super awesome and is also making a lot of people a lot of money is the embrace of like young adult original graphic novels. I love the DC Young Readers line. I love First Second. Like anytime I'm getting someone who like just likes good books and doesn't know where to start in comics, my list is always like usually like 7 first second graphic novels because they're so beautifully done. They're such beautiful book objects and they're great stories too. So that's new because I think when I was younger and in working at a comic store, it would be more like I would recommend Vertigo series to people and I would have to tell them to buy like 3 volumes of Y the Last Man or 3 volumes of Fables. And now you kind of only really get like one bullet with someone giving something a shot. Like if they're gonna, you know, they might read 5 different books, but they won't read 5 volumes of one book right away. So you have to be like the first volume really has to get people. And I think Saga did a great job of just sort of forcing us all to step up and kind of be those kinds of storytellers that don't get the luxury of, you know, 300 pages before winning over a reader.
Yeah, even, I mean, just even back to like probably late 90s, but like when Hellblazer started to get collected, that was always like a go-to recommendation that I would give to people, and trying to figure out which volume, like they didn't even number the volumes in the late 90s, you know, so it seems so like so simple to think about how to do it the right way, but you're right, it's the young reader stuff, especially working in a library, we see it. Like kids read comics. It's something, I think it's a fallacy that we've heard for years, that kids don't pick up comics. Maybe they don't go into comic stores all the time, but they sure as hell read comics. So how about you, Rob? Something that was that's changed since you got into the industry?
Well, I mean, obviously, just the presence of social media has been huge. I mean, MySpace came in fairly early when I started breaking in. But again, you know, I mean, it was a fraction of what it is today. I mean, we would, you know, I pretty much used my MySpace as kind of like a portfolio, but we all sort of like had artist websites and that sort of thing. Now you see like less artist websites, more just Instagram and that kind of thing. So I think, you know, the sheer amount of stuff that's out there has definitely increased. I mean, I remember hanging out in message boards a lot, and it was always just kind of a handful of forums we'd all go to and post our work and kind of critique and that kind of thing. Now it's just everywhere. I feel like everyone's making comics. And I'm kind of where you are too, Sina. Like it's hard to say what's, you know, to judge the whether it's good or if it's bad. It just kind of is right now. But that's the big thing that I think for me has shifted. It seems like it's never. I feel like when I first started kind of breaking into comics in the early 2000s, that there was an off season with comics. You know, I feel like you went to Comic-Con and then you went home and then you kind of like just kind of had a normal life and comics were over there. But now I feel like it's Comic-Con all the time, which, you know, could be good or bad depending on how you look at it. So that's my kind of take on that.
I will, I'm so sorry to keep talking. Is that okay? May I add more? I will say too, like, yeah, that's the other thing is like, you know, like there were a couple of boom periods that happened in the last decade. And it's like, some of that's like speculative, you know, those are speculative buyers and that's not consistent or reliable. And so that's why it's more like, all right, let's find the people who actually want to read these things. They're buying them because they want to own them and read them. And that's, again, why it's like, I don't know what's going to happen. And another thing I learned, too, working with Kirkman in The Walking Dead and sort of Rob had Alex, you brought this up, like in terms of just the shifting tides, is Robert was really smart about packaging his books with a lot of uniformity. Like the spines were all visually cohesive. The books, you got 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the manga thing where you get Walking Dead Volume 1, you need Volume 2, like, and they all look the same, and it's the same with like the hardcover editions, they all look the same, and they all follow the same sequence, and that is something that I was really trying to drive home with Marvel Comics, with Iceman. They wanted the third volume, when the book got picked back up, they wanted to have that be like a new volume number 1 in the book market, and I was like, gang, no, like, it has to be 1, 2, 3, like, this is not, like, yes, you might like spike boost numbers, but this is not for those people. This is for the people that are book market readers. And that, you know, you think about like the Harry Potter book series, which I shouldn't be bringing up Harry Potter right now. But anyway, I'm going to finish my thought. No, Lord of the Rings, never mind. Lord of the Rings is like, they don't put out 2 of the Lord of the Rings books and then say, all right, the third Lord of the Rings book is going to have a completely different graphic design aesthetic because that's our mood right now. You have to sort of follow through and make things look great on the shelf. Anyway, I'm so sorry, Sarah. Now it's
That's awesome.
And how about you, Sarah? So a difference from when you started?
Yeah. My whole experience with comics has been so convention driven. So like that's kind of where my mind keeps going. Like when I first started, it was very like comic fans going to a little convention every once in a while, and like my style wasn't exactly what a lot of them were looking for. So I actually was feeling a little bit like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. And then as I think like movies have come out and more comic adjacent shows, like bringing more people into conventions, it brings a wider audience of people who aren't necessarily looking for like golden age style or like traditional comic styles and stuff. So like it's been really cool like to see, you know, even artists too, like who have really weird styles, like starting to table as well. And just to kind of see the evolution of like, what is a comic style, where it is now is really, really cool. Also, I think just like all the YouTube famous kids and stuff coming in, it's interesting. That's bringing a whole other element to it. And like, again, the movies, all the cosplay and stuff, it's really interesting. Like, it's just completely, it's not good or bad, it's just way different.
Actually,
a lot more competition.
that was literally what I was about to say. Because I remember, I mean, when I found Little Depressed Boy and Chew, because they were the weird looking books next to Batman punching some guy, you know, right? Like that. And I love Batman punching somebody. I go back every week to see how he punches somebody. But like those were the anomaly books, right? They were different. But now you have so many, like, even at the height of my buying, it was like 20, 25 books a week. And now it seems like there are hundreds of books every week. So how do you guys, especially because you all have your own properties, you know, so you're not, I mean, you work with larger companies, but you're trying to get, for your own stuff, how do you get that stuff out in front of people? I mean, because you're not only competing with other comics, but you're competing with Netflix. You're competing with the stupid baseball game that I downloaded on my phone and can't stop playing in quarantine, you know? So how do you break through and get your stuff out there? Why don't we start with Rob?
Yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question. I think with Chew, like you said, it was a lot easier because we kind of came at a time where, you know, the image comics renaissance had just kind of started. And we were like the odd book that didn't really look like anything else. Obviously that shifted tremendously. So whenever I was starting Farmhand, I was kind of negotiating the same thing. You know, how do I lock people in for this thing? And I think I've seen a lot of consistency with Farmhand, sort of similar to how we did with Chew. You know, it was a core audience from the very beginning, and it stayed pretty loyal throughout. And I think that's kind of my focus is just to kind of take care of my people. And, you know, make sure stuff's visible. Like I still want image, and, you know, I'll still put out on social media whatever I'm working on. I still have a newsletter on my website that I kind of directly talk with my people. But I'm really focused on kind of taking care of the audience that I have, making sure they're happy. I mean, I have longtime fans, I mean, from 12 years ago that I know by name, that like we've kind of become friends. And like, I really like, I think taking care of them only builds it organically, because they'll take my book, they'll buy a copy of it for a friend, and it just spreads organically that way. So, but beyond that and social media, you know, Comic-Cons were pretty huge for that also. That's not really an option at the moment. Hopefully it will be again at some point. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Take care of the core audience, and hopefully it builds organically via socials and word of mouth.
How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, it's been a lot of, you know, it was the conventions mostly. Anytime I would kind of come up with something new, I'd make like that front and center. And other than that, you know, like just trying to branch off into maybe, like I want my work shown, and I want it in comics too. But I also like doing pins and stuff, like trying to kind of tap into that, and you get a whole bunch of other eyeballs on there that way. Like I tried doing some like fashion illustrations and stuff a while ago, and trying that out. I've kind of come to the realization that like my interests are real like niche kind of thing. Like like weird Victorian death stuff is like my jam, you know, so like that's gonna be this amount of people compared to a lot of other things. So kind of like what Rob's saying is like just kind of get to know those people that are into that too, and like through some Instagram stuff and through website and just Patreon stuff like that too. Like I've met some of those people who are super into that, and it's been kind of cool to get to know them a little bit better. And because it's what I really like too. It's like these conversations that are more like heartfelt and everything than just kind of business oriented, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah, so I don't know, just like kind of trying to branch out into as many different kind of like genres is been what I've been trying to do. I was hoping to do some like t-shirt stuff this year, but you know, so.
Do tote bags. Do not do t-shirts, because then you're stuck with dead sizes. Do a one size fits all thing.
Well, this is gonna be through a company that's, I don't think they're, yeah, but I've wanted to do my own stuff and seeing kind of like what Camilla D'Erico's booth looks like teacups and stuff like that. Like,
oh shit, yeah.
Yeah. So like, definitely want to do some textile stuff, and because if you think about it, you got a tote bag, it's being used, there's your art on it and everything, and like just trying to come up with the next like enamel pin, like what is that, has been like my waking question, you know. Because I don't know, like I said, I'm a little squirrel brain. I just want to keep making like all these different things and just stick my flair on it, I guess. So yeah.
How about you, Sina?
Well, Sarah, go on the Taylor Swift website because she's constantly updating her shop, and it's a great way to think about what people will buy merch of.
Okay, cool. I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Me doing a lot of online shopping. It's market research, I swear.
Yeah, mine has been a lot of tax write-offs for a book I will be making soon. Etsy.
I totally forgot the question. What was the question, Alex?
It was how do you get your stuff out? Kind of signal to
Oh,
noise
yeah.
stuff that's out there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the things I try to do, and I mainly, if I'm gonna do something for another company, I follow editors that I really like. So that's why my heart melted when Sarah mentioned Bobby Curnow, because a lot of the editors at IDW are just divine, splendid human beings that I just want to message with all day and waste everyone's time. But I think there's a lot of value in working for other companies and having them market you to their audiences. Like Valiant Comics has such an engaged, enthusiastic, and loyal readership, and just doing some variant covers for Valiant scored me these fans that really care about me. And I'm the same as Rob, where, you know, Alex, like you said, you picked up our books because there was something specific that called to you. And so our readers are these like awesome lifers that I know everything about them. They know everything about me. We are like, you know, checking in on each other and sending each other care packages in quarantine. And you have to honor that and nurture that. And then similarly with Sarah, it's like I do a lot of band artwork, and I try to only work with bands that I love. So that way, when these people come and you know, maybe find my page on social media, they see that I'm speaking the same language and I'm loving the same thing, and I love what they, you know, and it's about just kind of maintaining and honoring that rapport. And it, you know, anyone who's famous on social media for being an artist, well, for anything, it's a full-time job. And it's a full-time job kind of keeping up with people and replying to every message and replying to every freaking at mention and so on and so forth. But it's until, you know, we reach a place where we can afford assistance, you know, it's on you, and you've just got to do it while you're watching TV in the background. And it's, as long as it doesn't keep you from making the work. But I do a lot of that, and I do a lot of retailer relations. Like, I think if you can talk to someone who works at a comic store and help them understand the product, then they go and proliferate that knowledge. And I remember one time doing a signing in Seattle that just like really didn't go terribly, but it didn't go well. Like maybe like 4 people showed up who actually gave a crud about me, and then I maybe convinced like 4 or 5 other people to buy a book. But what really mattered was the girl who was working. Sorry about that. Am I still here?
Yep, you're back.
Anyway, what really made the huge difference though was I was chatting with this lady working there, Claire, and at the time she was mainly like a Hackslash fan. Like she didn't have any awareness of me. And cut to, it's like now 8-9 years later, and we're homies. Like we're in touch. Like we're friends on social media, and she picks up the stuff I do. And it came from just having a conversation and being mellow about the fact that like, oh, you don't know who I am. That's cool. Like I don't read Hackslash, so hey. But now I do. But anyway, yeah, it's one of those things of just you have to be open-minded and open-hearted and get rid of ego and just talk to people and be so grateful that anyone even is listening.
But so just like from the fan perspective, it's gotten harder to figure out what's coming next because there is so much stuff online. I think it was a little bit easier. I hate to say it, but like in the Wizard days, at least there was a magazine that came out every month that told you what was coming out, you know? So it felt like things were more compact. I know obviously Wizard didn't cover everything, but between that and the Comics Journal, I always felt like I knew exactly what was coming out every Wednesday. And now it's kind of tough to follow that. And I say that because, especially you 3, just personally, I'm so happy to have you guys on the panel, because like your work has been, so like Little Depressed Boy, I found exactly when I needed to find that book. You know, like I was going through some shitty times and that book was the right thing. Chew, it took me through like 3 jobs you know, and really, and it was like, it's like the soundtrack of, you know, my life is comics. It's the one constant. And Sarah, with The Ghost the Owl, it was literally the beginning of StoryFest for us. And I can't ever look at that book without thinking about the time I then texted Cody and was like, oh shit, did we promise Sarah Richard an owl for StoryFest? And we did.
Delivered, that was great.
But like on that, like as someone who deeply loves comics, that's something I think about, and I feel for you guys, because there's so much, and there's also, I feel like there are less channels to get there are less interview channels. Like I get that, like there are a lot of podcasts and things like that, and that's kind of where I get my comics news now. So on that note, very long-winded way of getting here, but like, how can your fans support, and fans in general, how can they support their favorite creators? What's the best way to do that? Yeah, you know, I obviously buy the books and stuff, but are there other ways that they can do to help? And I'll start with Rob.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, buying the books is huge. Again, you know, just kind of sharing the love on social media is pretty huge. I mean, it always means a lot to kind of check in on Instagram or something and see someone has, like, you know, featured my work, or they're kind of like sharing the love out there. Beyond that, I mean, like I said, joining my website, I have a really nice newsletter. You know, and I have an online store. That's another pretty big one. And it's not, you know, I'm handling this stuff myself. It's just me, and I have an assistant who helps me with my shipping, and that's it. So everything that goes, that is bought from that website, I built the website myself. I manage it myself. Every package that goes out, you know, my hands are on it. So that's pretty massive. So yeah, if they want to support me, the website is absolutely how you do that.
How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, same thing. Website, going on the store. Like I have a store. I have a Patreon that's been like saving my butt right now. I'm by no means making like cosplayer levels of money on it, but it's super helpful. And then that way, what I do too is like give sneak peeks of stuff I can't really show. Nothing under an NDA, but like gallery stuff that I've been working on. I'll show people on Patreon that like weeks before I can show it anywhere else. And actually I'm just doing, I just finished up an exclusive print that only like patrons will be getting. As kind of like a thanks for supporting me, because Patreon has helped so much. I'd also say like if you know, like Instagram's really helpful. I use Twitter mostly to rant about political stuff and retweet, but like Instagram, I'll show a lot of my art, and that's usually when any upcoming stuff is on there. But like pre-ordering anything super helps too. So like I have a Greek mythology book that I did with Simon & Schuster coming out next March, but the pre-order is up right now, and that's super beneficial. I've actually talked to a few people who are like, can I just buy it from you at a convention? And it's like, you could, but it actually helps me like way more if you get it, and you know, I'll sign it when you see me at a convention, whenever, you know, that happens. But yeah, pre-orders, yeah, I don't know. those are usually like real good.
And Sina?
I mean, but what both of you said is absolutely correct. And I would just add too, it's like, if money is something that a reader doesn't have at a moment but wants to show the love, it's like listen, play into the game. Amazon Goodread reviews, like those really matter. And it's really not even just the quality of saying like 5 stars, I loved it, but it's just the sheer number helps with weird SEO metric things. Sorry, there are fire cars and cop cars. I don't want to know. All right, moveon.org. But yeah, that stuff really helps. And I think, again, yeah, if you just like tweeting about people and spreading the gospel, because all of that, again, just sort of like builds out awareness, and the more people hear about your name and the more people hear about your work, it lands, you know, they start being like, oh yeah, that person, and then finally this weird thing will happen where they'll see Farmhand and they'll be like, oh, I need to go pick that up. So yeah.
So
yeah,
we're
definitely the spreading awareness of your favorite artists and art, you know, writers as well. Like I think when cons were still like letting cons know who fans want to be at the convention, like let the cons know, because then they'll bring us, you know, like we want to see people too, but sometimes it's hard for us to get to where, you know, fans are. So yeah, like the helping with spreading the names and the projects, and the Goodreads is a real good one too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's been an answer that a bunch of authors have given. I don't think readers understand how important Goodreads has become in the metrics for publishers. So just because we're running out of time now, but I did want it because we touched on the dumpster fire that is this year. So I'm wondering if, are you guys able to create, have you been able to create during quarantine and 2020 and whatever is on fire currently in the country? Let's start with Sara.
Yeah, trying to just forget about the news that I read on Twitter every single morning, because I need to be prepared of what's coming during the day. Yeah, it's been a few times where I've kind of gotten like a hit of the blues, I guess, but I'm also in my mental dream board. Like I want to come out of this with something awesome, or a bunch of different things. Like I want books ready to go. I want new art ready to go. I want like a whole new look to everything whenever the other side happens. So that's been a really awesome kind of like motivating thing. Like now I'm starting to be able to get into the stuff that I really want to create, and I want to just have like that really polished and ready to go kind of thing. So just keeping that sort of like light at the end of the tunnel vague thing has been helping me a lot. And then yeah, just drawing the stuff that I like to draw. Like owls make me happy, ghost spooky skull stuff makes me happy, so I've been drawing a lot of that, because it's no fun to be drawing stuff you don't want when you're already kind of super frowny face about everything. So yeah, and then actually just like watching a lot of shows that kind of relate to what I like for inspiration, and giving myself that permission to like take an afternoon off and finish the Nick, or like start this other period drama that I feel like would help get in the right mindset of this project I want to do. Because like my school and comics too baked it into my brain, like if you're not working, like what is wrong with you? How dare you be watching this show and not actively giving yourself worse tendinitis? So like yeah, just kind of also giving yourself a little bit of a mental break too is really helpful. Yeah.
How about you, Sina? Have you been able to work during this?
Luckily, yeah. I mean, like Sara said, there are just moments where it hits hard and you just can't. Like I think all the like Black Lives Matter protests, there were some uprisings here in LA that were just really, you know, I don't need to say anything. Just like they just left me kind of like, I don't know, I can't. But what's great is I've been able to go teeter back and forth between writer brain and artist brain. So I'm always keeping myself motivated, and similar to Sara, it's like I want to come out of this with just like a really clear point of view, and with something to say, and with projects that are going to kind of hit a little more harder and effectively than before. And also all of this has made me just like, I've said it earlier in this conversation, like what a gift, what a blessing, like what a blessing it is to have people who give a crud about what you have to say and the work that you make, and that people would come to see you, and that conventions would pay to fly you out, and you get so sucked in the cycle of it, or in the comparison is the thief of joy of it, when we were all just kind of running around doing the annual con circuit stuff, that you forget what a gift. So I'm super grateful, and I just try to take advantage of it. And I'm also because I don't have a social life, I'm playing video games again, and it's doing exactly what is happening with Sara and TV, where I'm just like right back in like, oh my god, my mind is stimulated and inspired in a way that it hasn't been, all because I'm playing Persona 5 and Final Fantasy 7 Remake. It's like, oh yeah, like so I'm still working, but there are down days, and you just got to be kind to yourself, and I think most people are so much more understanding. If like I've had some private commissions and I'm like, didn't happen this week because blah. And everyone's been like, don't worry, what's time?
How about you, Rob?
Oh man, well, I mean, this whole thing kind of hit at a really inconvenient time for me. I mean, in the rest of the world as well. Yeah, I was actually just in the middle of kind of starting a hiatus. I had just wrapped a really, really stressful arc of Farmhand, and I had just hit send on the final file to Image, and I was going to be taking like a week off just to do absolutely nothing. And then the school was closed, and my
So
kids have
it's
been.
your fault, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it was all me. This keeps happening over and over again, and my kids have been home since March. So yeah, we haven't productivity it's been kind of up and down a little bit. Like I said, thankfully I was already kind of planning the hiatus. But I've still managed to get stuff done. It's just not. I mean, kind of like what Sarah was saying. Like I'm used to pumping stuff out constantly. So when you hit those lulls of just kind of waking up and feeling like, like I don't really it's just not happening today. Being kind to myself and saying, okay, like I can take an hour, I can take this afternoon and just watch a movie, listen to some music or something, or just hang out with the family, and that's cool. But yeah, it's getting better now. I'm actually right in the middle of writing the next arc of Farmhand. And I finally, the first 3 months or so was just this really weird mesh of like time really had no meaning. And I'm structured. I usually am working to a schedule, day to day. So when that kind of went away, just everything just kind of it was just jello. It was just, everything was just all over the place. But it's getting better, so I'm optimistic.
And I wonder, just quickly, and maybe not quickly, but do you think the pandemic's going to change the way you view some of your past work, or change the way you create in the future? And I'm thinking, Farmhand becomes oddly prescient in some ways with the virus. So I just wondering if do you see your own work through a different lens now that this is happening?
That's a hard question. I mean, I see it as maybe a bit more important because it seems like people are really getting something out of it right now. Like this is a time where people are locked away and they're really hungry for this stuff. And I'm starting to get more and more emails from people that really seem to really be feeling what I'm making in a way. We had fans with Chew, but like with Farmhand, Farmhand's kind of more emotionally potent. And it's hitting people a bit harder than Chew ever did. So I think I'm taking it a little more seriously. Like I'm realizing the impact of what I'm making a bit more than I did before, I think.
So I just, because we are out of time, so I want to end on a bit of a fun one, and we'll go Sina, Sara, Rob on this one. So because StoryFest is such a celebration of all genres, and we like to say that like people come to StoryFest and they meet a book that they would not have otherwise met. So just wondering, what are you reading now that you'd like to recommend? And then if you could shout out either a local comic shop or an independent bookstore that people should check out. So we'll start with Sina.
I am currently reading Ginseng Roots by Craig Thompson, and I am recommending it to people because like I don't know how to feel. Like I'm a really big Craig Thompson fan, and this is an interesting format for him to put out a really big book in 48-page chunks, and it's also him trying to marry a lot of ideas and land the plane after sort of what felt like a rocky decade after Blankets. So I want to talk with somebody about this. And then in terms of just, fiction, I'm reading Severance by Ling Ma for one of my book clubs. And it's also a crazy cool book and a little like too prescient. I don't know that I'm like, oh yeah, it's coming to me right now, I guess. Okay. And then in terms of independent stores, Secret Headquarters in Silver Lake, California, I love that store. And they also have a really great web store of just like weird, unique items that they've either produced or, maybe some rarities or essentials that you should have, or signed books by creators. So even if you don't live in Los Angeles, you can really help them out. They're just such a cute confection of a shop. And then Skylight Books also near me. I love that bookstore so much. And I'm really glad that they're finding a way to just kind of keep business going and keep the roof, the lights on rather, not the roof. Sorry. Anyway.
Sara?
Yeah.
And Farmhand, sorry.
Yeah, I've got kind of a list going, or like a stack going anyway. Everything I kind of squirrel brain, again, get distracted, and then kind of add more stuff to my list before I'm even done with it. But Beautiful Darkness by Fabian Velman is something that I just kind of stumbled on, like on a little listicle kind of thing. It's like this really cute kind of comic all centered around these little gnomes that live inside of a dead girl in the woods.
Whoa.
Yeah, but it's adorable. It's like a little Studio Ghibli thing with a super beautifully dark twist to it. So it's like, that's where I like to live, I guess. So so that's been really cool to like see that juxtaposition and see how that works is really, really cool. But anything by Junji Ito, like I've got one of his new ones hopefully coming in soon. Anything by Edward Gorey, I'm always flipping through those. And first second, when Sina mentioned them, reminded me that the Adventure Zone comics are super cool. It's like one of my favorite podcasts, and it's like a D&D podcast that the McElroy brothers did, and they just started coming out with comics for it. That's done by Carrie Peisch, I think is how you say her last name. But for shout outs for comic books and bookstores, Merrimack Comics in Merrimack, New Hampshire. It's Bob's store. It's awesome, and he's supported me so much. So hopefully giving a little bit back there. Double Midnight Comics in New Hampshire and Concord and Manchester, and Aya Comics, which is Franco's store, and they're always amazing. So I think it's in Muncie and
Harrison, New York.
Harrison, there you go. And then like comic stores like Toadstool Bookshop is like a New Hampshire kind of bookstore that's always been kind of fun, and I always went in there when I was a kid. I haven't been into one recently, but I just ordered a book from them, trying to get around the whole Amazon thing, trying to go more for private or like independent bookstores. Yeah.
And Rob?
I'm actually working through Umbrella Academy again for the first time in years. My wife and I just binged the entire first 2 seasons, and I just remember like I haven't read that in forever, but I love Gabriel Roba, so I'm loving that all over again. I actually had never read Volume 3, so I'm digging it quite a bit. And store wise, I want to give a shout out to Big Easy Comics in Covington, Louisiana, and Crescent City Comics. There are actually 2 stores in New Orleans that are both amazing stores, and they always carry a really crazy array of just super indie local talent, like indie comics. So yeah, Crescent City Comics and Big Easy Comics, both phenomenal stores.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here, and everybody watching, thank you for watching, and go buy some comics.
Woo!
Thank you so
Thank
much. Hey.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this panel, head over to our StoryFest 2020 playlist and check out the rest of our virtual author events. And for more information about StoryFest, visit the library's website at www.westportlibrary.org.